Okay, so I got to see Uncharted, and what can I say? I fucking hated it. I thought it was impressively terrible, and I don't think words can describe how like I didn't even want to make this video. I was just gonna pass it on as like, okay, bad movie, move on. But there were just some things about it that just pissed me off to the core extent that it's like it's impossible for me to just talk about it. There is no script. This is just me rambling about why I think the Uncharted movie was a fucking disaster in every shape or form. Just getting into this not spoiler category, there are some they changed a couple of the backstories. That in itself isn't all that bad, but they somehow changed the backstories to make it seem worse than how it was implemented in the game. Not even comparing it to the game, I still question a lot of the things that goes around with it. Some of the characters, they're either like they have some of the chemistry, but or they have lines written like if they had chemistry, but they don't really have the developments and characterizations and relationship to have said chemistry, and just the way they treat certain characters compared to others like just makes me feel very it feels like a strong distaste in my mouth, more specifically with how they handled Chloe as a character. Her motivation is so flippant and just so uninteresting that honestly I can't even tell if she's even supposed to be a good guy or an ally in many cases. Mark Wahlberg as Sully is no, I can't even compare. I knew it was poor casting the moment I saw it confirmed, but the fact that I even got to see it in action, despite having some genuine good lines, I can just only wish it was given to someone that actually resembles Sully from the games. And I love Tom Holland, but he is no Nathan Drake. He never captured that essence of personality. He has the humor at best, but anytime he makes a quippy joke, he seems I can't help but always compare him to his Spider-Man character. So, frankly, him as Nathan Drake just never sold me in any sort of capacity. So, poor casting, and then a poor usage of, the another character. The puzzles in this film is terrible. I'll go into little details about it, a little bit later when I hit the spoiler territory. But when you compare the puzzles in this film compared to the puzzles in the games, games, first of all, the puzzles to get to said gold has always like at the very least takes place in like a whole fucking country or a whole jungle, like where everything is like filled with booby traps and stuff, but not in a fucking city. Like everything is so close to each other, it literally gets to the point where literally fucking any idiot could just walk in and accidentally find the fucking gold. And then, you know, there's so much like the twists and turns and the character betrayals in this one. It got to the point of it being annoying in many cases, and this film also like breaks the rule of show don't tell. When they had to explain a certain character's backstory, they choose to explain it rather than show it in a flashback. Again, I'll get into it in spoiler territory, but and ironically, while watching this movie, the action sequences just feels like I'm actually watching a video game. Ironically, considering that this is a video game adaptation, and a very piss poor job at that, which I know it shouldn't be a surprise because there's not really a lot of good fucking video game adaptations films, but the only way to really emphasize how much I really dislike this movie, I had to get into the spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen this movie and you are somehow interested in, just click out of the video and come back. But honestly, if you want my take, I wouldn't recommend watching this movie, especially if you're a fan of the Uncharted series. I can't, for the life of me, think of a reason how anybody that really likes the series can even like this movie in any sort of capacity. I genuinely tend to struggle with it. And even if you have not seen the film, I think even as an action film on its own, it doesn't even make sense in many areas. So let's start from the beginning. It sort of does a very similar approach to how Uncharted 2 opens up, and they open up with Drake in such a very shitty situation. In this case, he's falling out of the plane, very reminiscent of Uncharted 3. But it cuts to him falling off the crates after this epic fucking fight of him trying to get into it with some quippy, jokey remarks. It cuts from that to him being in his childhood. So that's what I mean by it starts off with a very Uncharted 2 like in a scenario, and then it goes back to him as a kid. So for anybody that thought thought Tom Holland was just going to be playing a younger Nathan Drake. That got debunked really fucking quick because no, he is supposed to be the Nathan Drake, not a younger Nate. So that got debunked pretty quickly the moment I saw the flashback sequence. So Nate and Sam are in this museum and they're trying to steal this map. I'm trying to find out what the actual map was called because I don't really want to pretend like I know. The first map made after the Magellan expedition. And when they get caught, they trigger an alarm while trying to steal the fucking map, and Sam is about to get arrested because apparently he had 3 strikes. So, rather than going to prison, Sam escapes, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry, little brother. I promise I'll see you one day." And then he leaves. So, they already changed the backstory of Sam and Drake, because in the games, it's implied that Sam and Nate couldn't go, because they were going to be framed of a murder that they weren't really responsible for. They had to leave the orphanage and start a new life, changing their names to Sir Francis Drake, which was a story that they briefly mentioned Sir Francis Drake, but they never really explained why Nate would name himself after that. It's just that Sam was like, "Yeah, you are Nathan Drake," even though he has no reason to really change his identity yet. And what happens after that, we never find out. We never know if he clearly never got adopted because he never speaks about any parents. So we never see him get kicked out of the orphanage, or should any legal actions have been taken, we never got to see that. It just jumps back to present day. So yeah, they changed that. They also implied the fact that Nate and Sam's father was also pretty close to them, which is also another thing that they changed from the games, which is implied that the mother mostly really cared for them before she died and the father just disappeared. Yeah, that's another one. Either way, these changes are not inherently bad, but it gets a little worse the more when you dig a little deep into it. This is just the basic premises of establishing the characters. So, Nate, present day, is a bartender. He meets up with Sully, who asks him to go for a job. It seems very strange at first that he would ask some random bartender for a job, but that actually gets answered really quickly. So he says no, he's not interested. And because there was a scene prior to him where he steals a bracelet from this blonde chick, who may as well just be Elena, because Elena is nowhere near mentioned in any sort of capacity, so he steals the fucking bracelet off of him, which prompted him to find his apartment and take it back. Then he sees the map, and it's like, oh yeah, I know about all this adventures of 18 people that need 2 crosses, and because they can't trust each other. Oh, cool, that's awesome. So, do you want to join my expedition? Nah, fam. Nate leaves the apartment, looks at some cards left by his brother, and then he's like, yeah, fam. I know I'm describing it like this, but it's like the only reason why he accepted it is because Sully knew Sam, but he doesn't know exactly what happened to him until a little bit later. This is where the backstory just gets changed. Sam knew Sully before Nate. The games don't really do the best job explaining this either, but it's at least implied that they both knew Sully for at least an equal amount of time, up until the Malaysia prison incident. So, but it's funny, you may as well just not have Nate say no the first time. It's just to literally establish that Sam has wrote to him at some point, but how quickly he changed his mind. He left the apartment, went to his home, looked at the cards, and then calls him back. And then it's like, yeah, fam, I'm in. So then they go into trying to steal one of the crosses in a building, very similar to the scene of Uncharted 4, where they have to either win the auction or, in this case, cut the power. But unlike Uncharted 4, they don't cut the power because Nate is attacked by some Scottish person, and they had to get away with this. Epic fight scene, whatever, cause a distraction. Sully somehow gets a jacket that steal the cross, pretending that he actually works for the museum. And Nate literally just has to fucking Han Solo his way out of it by being like, hey, I know this is awkward, but bye. So nothing like that. No shooting stuff. It's just mostly just, Nate being Han Solo, I guess, for 5 seconds. They leave, they meet up with Chloe, and she reveals that she has the other cross. How did she get the cross? It's never explained. And she's all like, wait, why are we bringing this boy here? And it's like, oh yeah, we're working together. And she's like, I didn't sign up for this, bye. And despite Nate having a fucking cross inside his backpack, a backpack that is sealed, and you actually need to go out of your way to try and open and steal the cross, she somehow got it from there. And then epic chase scene coming, which lasts about 5 seconds. This is probably not 5 seconds, okay, for like a good 3 minutes. It's like the least interesting chase scene I think I've ever seen out of a film ever. Chloe makes it to her car, doesn't fucking run Nate over, and then Sully's like, hey, if she can figure it out, let her go. And then Chloe's like, okay, bye. And then she's like, okay, maybe I can't do this on my own. So what's the plan? So then they went from I don't trust you to let's trust each other in a matter of a few minutes. So that entire chase scene was meaningless. And it's also established the fact that Chloe, working with Sully, she's been done dirty multiple times, so why would she take him up of his offer if she's just going to be skeptical for the good portion of time? But that's whatever. So they get the crosses. They start planning ahead of what they're going to do. They figure out the hell and heaven shit where one of them has to be on the top, the other one has to be at the bottom. And how they had to go through this entire path is literally in a fucking church. A public church where Nate's literally, so there's a nun inside this church, okay, and Nate expresses that he's not really fond of nuns. We don't even know exactly why, because it's not like they showed us him having like a terrible incident with a nun, unlike the fourth game where the orphanage that he grew up in, they never liked him or his brother. So we understand it from the game standpoint, but if you look at it into the movie standpoint, it makes no sense, because it would imply that the nun being kind of rude to Nate is more reasonable because he's kind of a troublemaker, which is the case in the game, but the thing is, they never show much of his relationship with the nun in the orphanage. But either way, he shows a fear, and everybody makes fun of him like fucking 3 times. Like, hey, if it wasn't funny the first time, maybe we hit it home 3 times in a row, then he'll be funny eventually. Either way, they start there's a nun in there, right, working in the church, and they're moving seats around just to figure out the fucking puzzle. And it's like the movie has so many moments in which the characters make so many irrational decisions in public where everybody can see you, but there's no repercussions of their actions. There's an even worse example as the movie progresses, but this is just them moving seats and just playing fucking detective in front of the nun, as far as she was aware. They go downstairs and they realize they had to split up because they needed the 2 cross. The whole purpose of the 2 crosses is the fact that it can't be solved by one person. It needs to be a team-based thing, so no one can just run off with the gold. So someone needs to stay on the top, and the other one needs to stay on the bottom, implying heaven and hell. All this in a church, mind you. There's booby traps in a church. And then Sully stays up, and Nate and Chloe stay on the bottom. Pause. So they go to so they use the crosses, they use the cross, open the path, and then they had to go through this little tunnel-looking thing, which leads to some bar party shit, and that also that it's called the Inferno, whatever the fuck. It's Latin for hell. They find a painting where also has the fucking, key. Like they had to use the cross in this random painting from this random party that also happens to be called Hell in Latin. There's a fight sequence that happens as the people that are working with the main antagonist just finds them, and then he pretends to be a bartender for a little bit. Then there's a fight sequence that go on. They got the painting to open, and then they go in. All this in a public setting where they clearly can see 2 people going inside a wall. How was this built? What's the logic behind it? Again, if it wasn't like some sort of hidden secret area in the fucking forest or someplace not in America, I could understand why it would be so cryptic. But this is just around the fucking street. Like, literally any idiot can accidentally set up those booby traps. So anyway, they find another place, to put the key inside the painting. They put it in, and then it turns out it's connected to the fountain, which means it's connected to a fountain which floods the entire inside of the place, and Sully has to find that key before they drown. He finds the key inside a restaurant, a fast food restaurant. And then before he sees it, but it's behind glass. So not only does he cause a commotion by tossing a table that two people were sitting on just to try and open it, but the main antagonist shows up, tries to kill him multiple times. He shoots the fucking glass with her own gun. Then they have a fucking fight sequence, which prompted to Sully throwing her to the glass, and then, hitting using the cross to unlock the key and saving Nate and Chloe before their untimely demise. All this, and then Sully just walks out of the restaurant. Nobody thinks about calling the cops or anything. He's just walking home scot-free. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, if this is truly Uncharted, there would at the very least be a police chase sequence. At the very least. Or at least the main antagonist's goons would get involved and then maybe enter a crossfire with the cops. But no, it's just this one bitch just fucking with them. And that's about it. So, then Nate and Chloe find the treasure, quote unquote, but it turns out to just be sand. But in the midst of those sands is when they find a map, and then they'll be able to find the gold. But oh no, Chloe betrays them. Why, you may say? Because Chloe has been done dirty before by Sully, and so she just doesn't trust anybody. There's also some backstory with her father, the fact that she discovered something that was worth millions and her father abandoned her for it. But, that implies the fact that she doesn't trust anybody, right? So why did she take this expedition with Sully? I don't understand, but it gets worse from here. So she's like, do you not know who I am? Do you even know what happened to your brother? Blah, blah, blah. She calls Nate a good guy and knocks him out and takes the map. So when Sully finds Nate, he demands to know what happened to his brother, and Sully just tells him that he got shot during one of his expeditions. That's it. He just got shot. He presumably got killed, and Sully left them. There's no flashback to explain the circumstances around it. It's just Sully's words, and you never get to see any sort of flashback of these two together in any sort of capacity. You never knew what their relationship was like. You can tell that Sully is kind of like a sleazy type of character, but this is part of the reason why I have issues with this being its own thing, because how the games treated Sully is the fact that despite him having being somewhat selfish to certain people, he really cares for Nate and Sam, but in this case he's just an asshole. Really, he doesn't give a shit about anybody. So anyway, and it's also implied that Sully has done some certain people dirty, but he would never leave Nate or Sam behind, so this is just a little bit weird. And again, when it gets worse with Sam, because, spoiler alert, he's not actually dead, but, we'll get to that when we get to that. The film, literally just implies that Sam just got shot in one of their missions, but you never understood the circumstances. In fact, it even implies that Chloe was the one that shot him, which makes it even more frustrating, considering the fact that Nate still trusts Chloe later on, kind of. I'll explain why. So anyway, Nate gets upset, and it cuts to the main villain, who's I'm not even gonna say his name. I'm just gonna call him Puss in Boots. So Puss in Boots is is trying to realizes that the treasure is not here, and then it turns out that Chloe was working with him this entire time, which makes even less sense of why he would help out Sully, or why she would make a big deal of all this commotion, especially with the backstory that she just doesn't trust anybody in general. Why is she trusting this clearly antagonistic character? I don't know. There's even a scene where, he's like, I don't trust anybody either, clearly implying he was threatening her, but whatever. So then they got the map, and they figure out where the gold might be, so they go to the plane, and then Nate and Sully sneak into this plane, and cue the Uncharted 3 reference that everybody loves so much. And then we're caught up to the present, where Nate was in that situation at the beginning of the movie, and we just really want to know why. So, yeah. But before that, you got to understand, you got to listen to this part. Honestly, this part is so stupid, it's actually just hilarious. So before the whole airplane sequence happens, Chloe and I don't really want to butcher his name, but one antagonistic woman and Puss in Boots are, just chilling, talking about how they're going to be rich and whatnot. And then the female antagonist just pulls off an Uncharted 1 and just straight up kills Puss in Boots. So now, the reason why I say Uncharted 1 is because you're implied that one character was going to be the main antagonist, but then he gets fucking killed, and then this other character that barely has any speaking lines is suddenly the main antagonist or the final boss. In the case for this one, I'll give her credit that at least she was more involved with the plot, chasing Sully at the very least. But damn, they really wanted to ham-fist the references of any Uncharted game ever. So I guess because Puss in Boots died, now Chloe just doesn't feel safe with this bitch. So now she betrays them. And then the fucking plane scene happens, and it goes somewhat exactly like how it goes, except instead of being in a desert, you're in the ocean. And yeah, Chloe figures out. Yeah, how Chloe escapes that she jumps onto the nicest car she can find, and then just dip out from there. And then they go. Then she and Nate go into this crate to hang on for dear life's sake. And then there are some shots where she's not even there, so I genuinely thought she like fell off like at some point. They go into they land on the ocean, and then they see land from a distance. And when they arrive at land, they see this random person that's like, huh, what happened to you guys? You look like shit. It's like, oh, we just jumped off of a plane and whatnot. And then this guy's like, huh, strange. That happened to me once too. And you would think that's a random comment until you looked up the fact that this is Nolan North, the voice of Nathan Drake from the video games. Yeah. This is the second Easter egg I was able to put up. The first Easter egg I was able to see was that the Naughty Dog logo was in Nate's bag when he was looking through the cards for Sam. But yeah, Nolan North is in this movie. Brief cameo, whatever. So now they go into this motel, they figure out what exactly the plan is, they spend all night figuring out the fact that maybe Sam was able to give hints to fucking Nate, which makes it wonder if he was trying to tell him. Why doesn't he just fucking tell him? Why does he have to make the messages so fucking crippling? It's like, yeah, it's been a place that you've never been before, but you will one day, and it's like, with that logic, he was able to figure out exactly where the location was. But Chloe's asleep, so he's got to make sure she doesn't, get betrayed by her. Chloe predictably sees the wrong address and then goes directly to the wrong one, not realizing the fact that, this person already knows I'm pretty good at betraying people, so maybe I should just be smart about it and pretend like I went, but actually follow him. After all, you implied the fact that you followed Sully through the airport without him noticing. So whatever, he goes. She jukes, and then she's out of the movie until by the end, where she just calls Nate a bastard. Anyway, so Nate goes into this one place very similar to Uncharted 4, and then but unlike Uncharted 4, where there's this whole expedition of trying to find Avery's treasure, he finds the treasure, the ships relatively quick, and Sully, still having the tracker from the fucking heaven and hell puzzle that they were going through, follow Nate all the way over here. They find the treasure, and then the villain who also solved Nate's just follow them in there. Epic fight sequence happens. They have these ships are old as balls, 300 plus years ago, and yet they were able to get helicopters to pick up the ships and just carried them without fucking them up. Do you know how old these things are? You would think that they would be breaking them at some points. So, yeah, again, epic fight sequence. It leads to a nice little character moment, the fact that Sully had to choose between saving the gold or saving Nate. So, once they hijacked the helicopter, and then they had this epic fight sequence where they destroyed the other ship with the helicopter carrying the other ship with the gold. Nate's trying to get to Sully's helicopter, and then oh no, Sully drops the gold, so now he has to save Nate. So how does he do it? He tosses the gold directly to the main antagonist. She falls to the water, presumably dies, but she's not dead, because once they drop the ship, she comes out of the water and she's like, "Huh, I'm alive!" And then the ship comically falls on her. This is so comical. I refuse to believe that they actually filmed that without the intention of making it funny, because that shit was fucking funny. And then they leave, and then there's hey, turns out I saved some gold, and here, have a bubble gum that I kept referencing for some reason, that only came into reference once, where it's just to keep a door open from closing, whatever. And then the movie ends, except not really, because there's a credit scene. There's not an end credit scene. It happens immediately as the movie ends, where Sam is actually still alive in the Malaysia prison, still writing to Nate. How did he end up in the Malaysia prison? Who knows? Who cares? And even if they did explain that he wasn't in that this whole thing was in Malaysia, the problem is the fact that they explained the circumstances, never showed it in a flashback, which means you could just it could just completely fly through someone's head, and you wouldn't even notice why he was even there in the first place. But either way, Sam's alive. Predictable. The movie ends. Good job. What a fucking garbage movie. Everything about it is just pure coincidence garbage and just has a lot of like pointless action sequences that just makes it feel like it came from a video game, which is ironic because it's not a compliment in this case, despite it being a video game adaptation. I shouldn't even be surprised that this movie turned out to be as bad as it was because I don't think there's ever been like a decent like I think Mortal Kombat and Detective Pikachu are the closest thing to like a decent video game adaptation film, and even then they still have like their own fair share of issues. But this is just a whole new level of just goddamn terrible. I can't even describe with words exactly why I hate like I had a terrible time. Even like trying to distance it from the games and just try to judge it from like its own thing. It's just awful. It makes no sense. Like everything is just too coincidental, and there's too many back and forths of characters betraying each other. It gets to the point where the characters are not likable. They're just boring at work. They're just boring at best and just infuriating at worst. Chloe, in particular, is just so badly written and just she's so frustrating in this film. And also to address the elephant in the room. Yes, Elena is not in this movie, and I find it a little bit dumb. But at least I can say that her character was spared from being in an atrocious movie like this. The only thing I can make a closest reference to Elena is honestly pretty easy. Either the blonde girl from the beginning that Nate robbed would have been Elena, or they could have had someone be in the news report dictating all the shit that Nate has done, and it could be Elena Fisher. Easy cameo. But no, nothing. And even if she were to be in here, I feel like they would have just fucked her up completely. I don't know. Like nothing. None of these characters really spoke to me. The circumstances behind it are just boring at best, or just so relying so much on coincidences. And yeah, I don't recommend this movie, especially if you're a fan of the games. I give this movie a 3 out of 10. If I had to say some things that I liked about it, I guess I was intrigued by some of the Easter eggs, and there I can see that there is some chemistry between Nate and Sully. It just only if they were casted properly, maybe I could actually see something going on between those two, as in like a cool friend father son relationship like in the games. But again, none like Tom Holland as Nate is not Nate. Somehow they did a shittier casting job with this film than in the Han Solo origin story. And Mark Wahlberg as Sully is just also terrible. I just think Tom Holland looks too young to be playing adult Nate, despite there being one shot where he almost looks exactly like him. But yeah, all in all, if you like the games, just don't watch it. Don't watch this movie. It's not. It's a complete waste of your time. Um, yeah, you'll get more pleasure out of the shit you took last night than watching this movie. This movie is just fucking atrocious.